Because I don't know whether you ever heard the old adage that tone is more in your hands than even in your gear. You can go back to Nuno Betancourt. We were talking about Nuno earlier. Nuno, I read an article. He had an opportunity to play through Eddie Van Halen's rig back in the day. And he was so excited because he was going to play through Van Halen's rig. He was going to sound like Eddie. And he started playing, and it sounded just like him.
So,
You know, there's certain things. Can you play clean? You play through distortion? Do you need delay? Do you need this or whatever? But ultimately, I play through my friends' rigs, and I still sound like me. And my friends play through my rigs, and they sound like them. So I don't know if I would ever miss anything, because that's the old adage. It's you sound like you because of you. Gear just helps.
so distortion, delay, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Would you
yeah.
miss any of it?
I played shows where I just plugged into an amp, and I played shows where I've had a full pedal board in front of me. And I've never heard anybody sit there and say that I sounded any different. And I can say the same thing for my friends, around here that have been playing for a while. They always sound like them.
Today in the Wired Garage, we're plugging straight into the life of a working guitarist. Dave McCarty is one of those players you've seen on stages all over Dayton and maybe on your screen in a virtual band video. But today we're going under the hood. We're talking about the sound he's chased for decades, the reality of bar bands, and what it means to be a modern guitarist in a world full of modeling amps, home studios, and remote collaboration.
Welcome back to the Wide Garage with Pops. In this conversation, we're going to dig into the tone he's built over the years, the bands and nights that shaped him, and how technology has completely changed what it means to be a working musician. So, Dave, thanks for hanging out with us in the garage today. So we go back, we just got talking before we started recording, we go back to the 90s, years and years ago, and we really haven't seen each other a lot since then, but I've been watching you on Facebook and seeing you, out on the bar scene, you're still playing. So when someone asks what kind of guitarist you are, what would you say today?
Strictly, it's a hobby. It's soon after we kind of disconnected our relationship, Brian. I had my last ditch effort of being a professional musician. Now, there's different definitions, obviously, of professional musician, but when I really tried to make it my lifestyle, and we wrote a bunch of songs, recorded in a high-end studio there in the Dayton area, released the CD, had some interest, but when the breaking point for me they wanted me to quit everything I was doing job related, which you knew what I was doing at the time, and go on the road for non-guaranteed money. And I realized, I wasn't 18 anymore. I was sitting about 24, 25, and I wasn't willing to take that chance.
Yeah.
So since that point, I was like, you know what? I need to keep doing it because it's been part of my life for all these years. And it's more hobby based than anything, but it's also still a major commitment.
Sure.
Where do you feel most at home musically? The live room, home studio, jam sessions? What's your preference?
Boy, the older I get, the more I just want to stay home in the studio. The older we get, we don't stay up like we used to. I was actually telling somebody tonight, COVID changed a lot in this world, but for a working musician, it changed a whole lot. Prior to COVID, if you were going to be in a bar band, you started at 10 o'clock at night, and you played till 2 a.m. And once COVID hit, the whole game changed. Nobody wants to stay out till 2 a.m. anymore. So now these same bars will have the same bands play from 8 to 12 or sometimes 7 to 11, which, at this point in time suits my lifestyle a heck of a lot more. Back in the day, you played till 2 a.m. By the time you tore everything down, loaded your car up, settled everything you needed to, sometimes you weren't home till 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And I look back on it, that was just 6 years ago. I don't know if I could do that anymore.
Yeah, I imagine then if you were touring on top of that, that's just compounding week over week over week of just not
Yeah.
getting sleep or trying to fit it in at odd hours. If you could answer this question, I commend you. I know how tough this is. What are the three guitarists that most shaped your playing, and what did each one leave behind in your sound?
That's a good question. I started playing in 1983. And when you were a guitar player in 1983, that was the beginning of the hair bands. So you had to be, what they call, for lack of better terms, a shredder at that time. So my first real big influence was Randy Rhoads.
Mm.
And back then, it's funny. I talked to all the other guitar players about my same age, and that was the big either Rhodes or Van Halen era. And there was very few people. I mean, everybody respected both of them, but you kind of followed the path of one or the other. And for some reason, I followed more of the Rhodes thing. Before I really knew what he was all about, he was more classically trained, more technical, more by the quote unquote book. Where Van Halen was just fly by the seat of your pants and let her rip. He was that guy. When I started getting a little bit older, probably the next one that really influenced me was, years later, was Nuno Betancourt from Extreme.
That's ironic.
Oh, yeah. Nuno was just almost like a jazz, just a funk player that incorporated all the 80s, tricks and all that other stuff that went into it. Just phenomenal.
He was pretty extreme.
A little bit, yeah. I actually met him. I was telling the kid tonight that I work with when we were at a dinner. He's a little guy. When you see him on screen or videos or something like that, he's larger than life, right? He just looks like this big, but he's a small in stature guy, but big in playing. I mean, he's just still just an absolute monster. Um, and then after that, probably guys like Steve Vai, and those are the guys that always thought outside the box. Because they always say, you got to follow, musical theory and all this other stuff. Those guys kind of, and all three of them, with the exception of Rhodes, kind of broke the mold of what a rock and roll guitar player really was. And those are the kind of guys that always kind of appealed to me.
That's awesome. Great answers and great explanations too.
Is there a song that you never get tired of playing, or is there one that tests your patience?
It's funny because I haven't done an original project in quite some time. And the problem with playing cover tunes, especially when you're in a working band that plays a lot, the songs go from something you really like to something that just becomes, my wife and I will be in the car, riding down the road, and I'll hear a song come on the radio and I'll turn it off. She'd be like, "Why'd you turn it off?" I said, "I'm so sick of that song, I can't see straight." But it's funny, Brian. You ask the ones that kind of try your, whatever. That's the old argument between local musicians. I mean, do you play stuff that you like, or do you play stuff that the crowd likes? The key to me is finding that happy mixture. Because you can go out there and play all the dance hits and stuff like that. I've never been a dance type musician. I always joke around. There's bands that play in this area that they base their success off that night if there's everybody's up dancing.
Yeah.
I'd rather people be sitting in front of us watching us, admiring, what the drummer's doing or what the singer's doing, than just up there dancing, not fully paying attention to what we're doing. So and that's the thin line. Do you play something that you like, or do you play something that they like? I've never fully found that balance. I don't think a lot of musicians really have.
Which artists or songs have surprised you by becoming influences later in life? Is there, let's say after Nuno, after Vi, maybe after that shredder area, was there anything that started to appeal to you later? Did taste change?
Absolutely. I quit becoming so stuffy. I mean, when I was younger, I was once again, I was into that shredder mentality, or the bands had to play that style of music. What Brian brought up earlier, we did that virtual band thing, and the first thing we did was Message in a Bottle. I wasn't a big Police fan when I was younger, but when I got to be a little bit older, started to appreciate music more well-rounded instead of that little tunnel that I was in all those years. You
Mhm.
realize that Andy Summers from the Police was a phenomenal player, but he didn't fall in that shredder mode when I was younger that I felt like I had to listen to, because I thought that was the only thing that could influence me. You
Yeah.
never think, a guitarist like Prince, was a great player because of his style of music. But when you get a little bit older and open your mind a little bit more, you go, my gosh, that guy was,
He can rip it.
He's a monster,
what a
monster player
musician.
and musician. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if someone wanted to understand your tone, I think I hit this a little bit earlier, but what track or solo says it's you? What should they listen to first if they want to understand you? What is a Dave McCarty guitar solo or tone?
So going back to that shredder mentality, it was all about the licks and the tricks and stuff like that. When you get a little bit older, you realize it's not all about technique, it's a lot about feel. And if you really ever talk to a guitar player that's been playing for a while, the ultimate goal is to be able to combine the two, where you can sit there and play those licks that supposedly wow the people that watch you, but still play the stuff that the average listener sits there. I mean, you can sit there and hold a note for a couple measures versus screaming through those measures. It's funny. I got a really good friend of mine that him and I have known each other since I was probably 15. And I remember, and he's about 2 or 3 years older than I am. And he would always tell me, you got to listen more to Neil Schon from Journey. That is the classic example of a guy who can combine the two, that makes musicians and non-musicians kind of feel the guitar solo, not just the song itself, but you can come into the solo where you don't, what you play impresses both the musicians and the non-musicians. Or even when you can hum a guitar solo, versus, like you get like Yngwie Malmsteen to me was, just phenomenal. The guy can play, probably, as fast as anybody. But the biggest criticism with him is that they're like, well, he plays with no feel. I kind of disagree a little bit because he's got, of all those neoclassical guitar players, he probably has as much feel and stuff as anybody. That's, Steel, I know Brian told me you play. I mean, that's the big argument, right? There you go. But it's like, okay, do you play with feel? Do you play with speed and technique? Can you combine the two? And I think the older I get, the more I try to combine the two. And I hope it
Phenomenal
portrays out, I guess is a good way of putting it.
So we're going to switch now to band life and live energy. And I have a question, but then I'm gonna shift off of it for a minute because I'm gonna see this may be a little bit better question to ask you. Of all the places you played, you don't have to name the place, but what type of place do you prefer? Like, I know you probably haven't played arenas or nothing like that, but of the bars, there's some that are larger and some that are more like 3 floors and I go to Nashville a lot for work, so I get to see Broadway and see all the different types of bars and setups and configs and how they are and acoustical. So what type of bar gets you going, or is this your favorite type of bar to play in?
So I've always said I have 2 bucket list places that I want to play before I quote unquote retire. One of them I played, one of them I haven't, and that's Bogart's down in Cincinnati. Basically a 2,000 seater. I played there a couple times, fortunately to a sold out crowd. There's nothing that's better than that. It's not really a bar. It's more of a venue. People are there strictly to see music. They're not there to socialize with their friends. They're not there just to drink, just do whatever like the normal bar scene is. They're there strictly to see music. So
Right.
it's very much a concert environment.
Right.
The problem is I would play 1 week at Bogart's, then come back and play a 150 seat place in Dayton where it'd be half filled. So you want to talk about an ego check.
Right. Right.
The other place that I said I always want to play before I retire is play at the Phrase. And of course, the Rose is another place that's allowing local bands to play as well.
That'll be a good place to play.
Absolutely. I got friends that have played there over the last couple of years. Granted, they were all original bands. They got to open up for some pretty decent nationals that came through at the Rose. And the Phrase does it all the time. They had I think the Phrase has a Tuesday night where it's $5 to get in. And sometimes it's just local bands that come in.
Yeah, they do like little festivals and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, I've never had the opportunity to do it. Like I said, that's the I guess the holy trinity, between places. I've done 1 out of 3.
Well, I
Much to
think
my
back in
wife's
the day,
chagrin, I got to keep playing till I do those other 2 places, right?
exactly. Back when you started and back in my heyday, as far as my age and stuff, the places to play back then would have been Hare Arena
Yeah.
and McGuffey's.
Yep. Boy, I played McGuffey's. I played McGuffey's more times than I care to admit.
I think like Autograph got booed off stage when they opened up at Van Halen with Van Halen at Hera, and then they went to McGuffey's, and they were like the best things in sliced bread. It's just you can't open up for some bands,
There was, McGuffey's, there was a famous story about Guns N' Roses when they were playing either the Nutter or it had to be the Nutter because I don't think they ever played Hera.
Mhm.
They were notorious for going on stage late. And what they did is on the way to the arena, they swung by McGuffey's, went up, got up on, played on the band that was playing that night, played on their gear, played 3 or 4 songs, got back in their probably limo and went off and played the Nutter Center. So
Wow.
McGuffey's had a lot of decent acts that came through that place.
But
Yeah, I met Kid Rock one night at McGuffey's.
did you?
Yeah, that was he signed a band. I think their name was Paradigm at the time, and I was playing in an original band, and we were supposed to open up for him at McGuffey's, and he was playing Hera that night. So we played our set, and his band never showed up. So we ended up playing the whole night. I mean, there was a line down the sidewalk at McGuffey's. It was just crazy that night. So as I was loading out that night, a limo pulls up behind McGuffey's, and Kid Rock gets out of the limo. He sits there, looks at me, and goes, "So how was tonight?" I go, "It was sold out." He goes, "Yeah, me too." A few more people at Hare Arena than there was at McGuffey's. I can promise you that.
What's changed most for you during your live performances since you started? I imagine it's got to be gear, maybe more than logistics. But how would you say what you do now has changed when performing?
If you mentioned gear, when I was younger, I used to run around with 412 cabinets. And if anybody's ever seen
You
a
did not run
412
anywhere with
cabinet,
those. You
those,
walked with that.
oh yeah, I mean, those things are, the ones I have are about 110 pounds a piece.
Mm-hmm.
And, playing McGuffey's, I'd have 4 of them on one side of the stage. And at one point in time, I had dummy cabinets because it's all about perception, right? The more cabinets you
Right.
have, the cooler you look. At least I thought. So I always, getting back to the Bogarts thing, I always sat there and said, if I ever play Bogarts, I'm going to borrow every cabinet from everybody I know, and I'm going to load the whole back of them, and I'm going to have this big presentation. What I've switched to over the years is I have 2 floor monitors that I play through, and I play through a modeler. So, which
Yeah,
is no presentation whatsoever. Matter of fact, your gear's pretty much hidden. It doesn't look like you're playing through anything. And that's what I played through at Bogarts. Even though all those years I said I was going to have this big wall of sound behind me. A lot of it is I just don't like hauling around heavy stuff anymore.
Yeah. I mean, the tone that you can get out of an Axe FX or I think the Helix and stuff, and then there's one that lets you just copy your amp tone. It's crazy. It's just nuts. What do you think is the most important? So you're in a band, forming a band. You've been in a band a long time. What's the most important thing for band trust?
Guys that show up prepared. If I, like I said, this is a hobby for me now. So to me, if you show up at a rehearsal and you're not prepared, you are basically saying you don't respect the time of the other people in the group. One of my favorite sayings is, I'm not ever going to say I'm busier than you, but I also know you're not busier than I am. So if I could spend the time to learn the song before you go into a rehearsal, it's almost, it is expected that everybody should have that same respect for everybody else as part of the group. Rehearsals are for putting the song together, not learning the song. The group I'm playing with right now, full time, they're all about that. They understand, it's respect everybody else in the room to show up prepared. It's easy to put something together if everybody's prepared. So we're coming into rehearsals, learning sometimes 5, 6 songs of rehearsal and playing them out the next week. And that's a true testament to everybody knowing their parts and learning their parts. There's nothing worse than just one guy in the band not knowing their part and somebody else having to show them their part. It's frustrating.
So I'm going to switch over to virtual bands here. Talking about your virtual project during COVID, I think it happened, a message in the bottle. How did that process work? How'd you get involved in that?
That was amazing. We were talking about Sweetwater earlier. I had a buddy of mine who was a rep for Sweetwater. He was a head rush and chord rep. When COVID hit, obviously nobody was playing in bars. Bands weren't touring anymore. Nobody was doing anything, but there was still a niche to play and to put something together. So a really good friend of mine, a guy named Jeff Gastineau, him and I were doing a side project in the Springfield area at the time. Because of him being a rep for Korg and Head Rush and him working at Sweetwater, he knew people all over the country. So he reached out to me and said, "Hey, what would you think about doing a virtual project?" We did Message in a Bottle was the first one, but there's about 5 or 6 other ones out there
Oh,
that
wow.
I did with him. And what it was he would find click tracks of, we'll use Messages in a Bottle as an example. He would have like a scratch track of that with a click track, and he would send it to each individual musician. The click track kept everybody on time. So I would maybe have a drum track on mine, maybe a bass track or something, and then the vocals. So I have a home studio, so I would lay my track down. Then he would send a track off to the drummer. It might just have the click track and maybe some scratch tracks in there too. They would record their part, singer, everybody else that was involved in the project. You finish everything off, you take the stem through the recording process, and we just send it off to Jeff. So then Jeff put all that stuff together, lined everything up with the click track, mixed everything down, and then everybody sent off their video piece of it. The misconception is everybody's playing live in those videos, but it's not. We're basically playing back to the track. But he pieced all the video, all the audio together, and boy, that just came together really nice, really
So
nice.
cool. So when you record that part alone, you have the click track, you record it. What was your expectation on that final product? And it came out exactly how you wanted it to. Like, is that an experience that you're used to, essentially?
That was the first time I did any kind of virtual stuff with, especially people that weren't even in the same city with you.
Hmm.
I had no idea how it was going to come out. It was just like I knew I was, I played through an Axe effect. So you mentioned that earlier. So I went in and dialed my tone as quick, closely as I could to Andy Summers. And just cut it and sent it off to Jeff going, now we'll see. It was, boy, he had that thing turned around in maybe a couple weeks. And he sent me a copy of it. He sent everybody that was involved in a copy of it before he released it. And I couldn't believe how good it turned out. But after we did the first one, I expected the same thing out of all the rest of them because I
Yeah.
knew what he could do.
I mean, knowing that, going through that experience, going through COVID, no longer being able to play places, and then you have that experience. Is that something that you would be up for again? Is that changed the way that you've looked at collaboration and making music?
I do it in a heartbeat. The guys that, the people that I know in the Dayton area that saw me do that, they're like, "Hey, can you get him to do another one so I could be a part of it?" I mean, it was just fun. I mean, it's a different experience. When you play live, you got the reaction, but then you have the together product, when you do something virtual like that. I've done other things where, like we played live and people, I play in an Iron Maiden tribute band. I don't know whether you guys do that too. That's a lot of fun, and it's big production. It's big everything. Every time we play, we do some kind of recording on it. So we got all these different cameras around the stage, and the audio is all mixed down at the board. We got professional AVI guys, out of Cincinnati that work with us there. And that's another thing. It's a little different from the virtual things you're playing live, but still, when you see the finished product, it's just like that. Your live collaboration versus your virtual. The virtual is very controlled. The live is like you never know what's going to happen, and you'll get surprises out of video, audio. Some of the audio stuff you can go back and fix. Because if you're playing live right, I mean, nobody's playing perfect, and if you're actually
Right.
trying to do a show too, and
Well, it's
you got
kind of
all
like
your
this
bumps and
podcast. We don't.
yeah,
It's like kind of like this podcast. Even though we
We'll
don't do it
fix it
live,
in
we have
post.
editing. We still look at perfection.
right. And
So,
sometimes off the cuffs, there's nothing wrong with that,
yeah. So I'm going off the script here again because something came to mind. Back in older days, there was it's like argument about rights, like online music versus, like you used to buy albums, buy CDs, things like that. Then you had Napster and all these things. You got the arguments about Apple Music and rights, and Metallica, I think, got mixed up in a lot of that, right? Taylor Swift with her owning her rights of her own songs and all those kind of things. And now what you run into now are AI bands that are just not even real. What are your feelings on that? Now that you work your ass off, you know, your fingers to the bone, literally, and now you got these AI bands that are getting this traction.
Well, I could take it to another level. I mean, people that use samples. I'm just once again, bruises and bumps. That's part of the beauty to me of music. I got and there's nothing wrong with this. It's just not something that I like. But I got local band buddies of mine in the Dayton area that use samples. And not just there's some bands out there that they don't have a keyboard player, so they use keyboard samples. That's one thing. But when you start sampling in vocals and you start sampling in guitar parts when you have a guitar player, just to make yourself sound more like a jukebox than actually a live band, it's not for me. It doesn't mean it's not right. It's just me being. I've been accused of being a perfectionist, when it comes to music, and I just like with the invention of AI when that first came out. The other guitar player that I'm in a band with right now, just basically he did something with AI and it wrote a song for him in like 30 seconds. And he sent it to me. He goes, "What do you think?" And I go, "It sounds pretty good." He goes, "Well, it's not real." I go, "Then why are you sending it to me?" Because, I don't like that stuff.
But some of that stuff like AI, to get an idea started, to flow, but to actually perform, to me, it needs to be you, right? It's like us. We did a lot of research on AI. We did a lot of research with AI for work even, but the performance itself, for a lot of the fact, even AI automation we do, it's work. And I don't know. I'm just this AI crap, the characters and all that kind of stuff. I guess I'm just too old for it. But
I mean,
It's the old
if you
guy
go
get
to
off my lawn type mentality, right?
it is.
But
if you
I
go
mean,
to a show or a concert, I mean, I don't want to just listen to a speaker or watch a video. I want to see a live human performing and doing those things. I guess that brings up the question of, well, what if they create it all with AI and then they just cover or perform that?
so Kiss retires a couple years ago. They're coming out with avatars and AI, and that's going to be the new version of Kiss. And I'm like,
Hmm,
I
that'll
don't,
be
I don't know
interesting.
if I could follow that.
That's
You know?
Gene just trying to make more money.
Well, that's what he does,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, he does. It's all about the characters, the dolls, and
Oh yeah,
everything that's out there.
it's all about the marketing.
It'll be Kiss microtransactions. Have the band play songs for you in your game or something crazy. So, if I were to if I blindfolded you and handed you your main rig, what would be a piece of gear that you would miss? You would be able to tell your tone is different. Like, I know you're playing with the Axe FX, but let's pretend it was a stomp box pedal board instead. What's the thing you need to have in your pedal board or your tone or your chain?
It's funny because I do have the Axe effects, but I still have a analog Mesa Boogie rig, and I was a big
Oh.
a boogie guy for years.
Ugh.
Let me kind of rewind a little bit because I just had this conversation a couple weeks ago. I have a good friend of mine. He's actually the drummer in the Iron Maiden band, the project I'm in, and they discovered he had a brain tumor. So he had to go in, did a 16-hour surgery, and we did a fundraiser for him a couple weeks ago at a club called the Hidden Gem in the Dayton area. So there was all these great guitar players, great musicians, and I brought my rig out, and my buddy brought his rig out. Very similar rigs. Matter of fact, I buy all my stuff from him because he's the guy who, I wouldn't say I'm a gearhead, but if somebody could show me how to use something instead of me figuring it out, I'm that guy.
Okay.
So that's my friend who does that. So he's the one who originally bought the Axe Effects. If you've ever messed with an Axe Effects, it's not the easiest piece of gear to get to sound good. But once you get it sounding good, it's just, they don't make a modeler better than that. So we had all these different players, including like my local mentors. We're playing that show. And they were playing through my rig. And the thing is like, is that going to sound like my rig or is it going to sound like him? Because I don't know whether you ever heard the old adage that tone is more in your hands. that even in your gear, you can go back to Nuno Bencourt. We were talking about Nuno earlier. Nuno, I read an article. He had an opportunity to play through Eddie Van Halen's rig back in the day. And he was so excited because he was going to play through Van Halen's rig. He was going to sound like Eddie. And he started playing, and it sounded just like him.
So,
There's certain things. Can you play clean? You play through distortion? Do you need delay? Do you need this or whatever? But ultimately, I play through my friends' rigs, and I still sound like me. And my friends play through my rigs, and they sound like them. So I don't know if I would ever miss anything, because that's the old adage. It's you sound like you because of you. Gear just helps.
So distortion, delay, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Would you miss any of it?
I played shows where I just plugged into an amp, and I played shows where I've had the full pedal board in front of me. And I've never heard anybody sit there and say that I sounded any different. And I can say the same thing for my friends, around here that have been playing for a while. They always sound like them. I mean, granted, you need certain effects or certain tones, using distortion or overdrive or whatever to be able to do certain things. But of course, what you're missing right off the bat, right?
If you're playing by yourself just for fun, are you generally leaning towards distortion or not?
Yeah, when I'm at home, I'll use in my studio. I use a lot of universal audio stuff, so it's all simulated through my what they call a DAW. Basically your recording apparatus, and it has a Ibanez tube screamer hooked in through a Friedman model amp. You got the chorus pedal in there. You'll have a delay pedal. And when I go in, those are my default settings. And when I'm just kind of messing around at home, that's
nice.
Pretty much just the three things I have in place.
So is there any piece of gear there that's too beat up to sell, but too precious for you to replace?
I have a 94 Les Paul. It's a 57 reissue. And I bought the thing in December of 94. I don't play it as much as I used to because it's pretty dang heavy. And the older I get, the more I don't like going back to the heavy stuff. But I'll never sell it. Never get rid of it. I've broken the headstock on it twice, ripped the pickups out of it a few times. But I always joke, if my kids don't want it, it's going in the box with me. I just don't want to sell it. I'll never sell it.
I mean, the tone that comes out of those, with how heavy they are, phenomenal sounding guitars, but so heavy.
Back to passive, and I mean it's a boat anchor. I mean it's heavy. It's all mahogany,
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember the first time I broke the headstock on it, I actually had a tear in my eye. I didn't know at that time you could repair the headstocks on those Les Pauls.
Yeah, that the angle that those joints are cut, susceptible to that. There's a real good video. It's not a Gibson, but it's a Dean, and it's the lead guitarist from Trivium. He's singing, performing on stage, headstock falls over, and he has a meltdown and throws the guitar, and good stuff. Good stuff. Dave, thank you so much. This has been a blast. We've gone from sweaty bar stages to home studios, from hauling tube amps the size of elephants into clubs to trading files over the internet. What I love about the story here is that you have decades of real world experience, band experience, and then I think this is also unique. You've not been stuck in your ways. You've grown with modern approaches. The Axe-Fx, for example, if this was the 90s and there was the argument of solid state versus tube amp would win every time, but the technology has come so far now. And I think that's awesome that you're making use of it, and you're back thanks to you as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, Dave, thanks again for taking us inside your world as a modern guitarist. And for those listening, stick with the Wired Garage feed. In our next conversation, we're going to get more personal with Dave and talk about how he keeps music alive while juggling work, family, and real life. Until then, I'm Pops, and this is the Wired Garage, where we talk about tech, tools, and the humans behind them. Thank you.